Hey, this is Pablo Legado with Abundancia Mindset, and this presentation we're going to cover how to get out of debt. Just want to have a quick disclaimer. I'm not a certified financial planner or advisor, at least yet, but the contents of this presentation are mainly for entertainment purposes, and you don't hold me accountable for any of the advices presented, and it's really up to you to take your decisions. So I would ask for you to consult with your own CPA and go from there. So just the reason I'm covering this because I've had a lot of debt growing up and it was very difficult getting out of it. So I figure I put a presentation together to help people like myself or yourself if you're watching this to get out of debt. And I wanted to share my debt story here. So when I was 15, 16 years old, I had my official job at Kroger's. As you can see, I was making $5.25 an hour. And then, as I was interested in opening a bank account, I couldn't at that point. So I ended up opening a joint account at age 16 with my parents. And during that time, I had signed up for a martial arts class that cost about $130. And to my surprise, this was a contract. Obviously, most people would advise you to read contracts, but at that age, I wasn't aware of what that meant really. And I just wanted to go, learn martial arts. And, went on for a while till I had to start college and I didn't really have a steady job. So it was difficult to actually pay it. And I couldn't attend, one, because I had lost my car in an accident and the drive was quite far. And so anyways, I was negative 700 at some point. And on top of that, I was paying braces because my mom's health insurance didn't cover for the whole thing. So that was the cheapest I could get for braces. And the reason I was down so much, it wasn't so much just because of the martial arts contract, but because anytime they would draw money, I would hit a negative. And then I remember that it was a $30 overdraft fee. So anytime I would try to pay it, they had basically I couldn't get out of it because it just kept going out in the negative. And it took a few days for me to kind of transfer money. And anyways, that added on to it. So here on the right-hand side, basically just give you a little bit of time frame of the time it took me to get out of debt, right? And again, because I was starting very young, there wasn't really a lot of financial advice that I got from anyone. And I think a lot of times some of our parents still stick to that traditional model of just saving, right? But there's really no advice or strategy on how to actually pay off your debt. So just wanted to share my story and just let you see that this took almost 10 years to basically get out of debt. And not only because of this, but I share this story because a lot of us have younger siblings, or this is something that maybe might share with them, so that way they learn from our mistakes, right? And the reason why I'm showing you this is because I went through this and it wasn't a great experience, but now I get to present this mystery to you. And wanted to kind of point out that from 2009 through 2016, I incurred about $70,000 in debt. So that was a combination of credit card debt. It was a combination of college as well, college loans. And then later on, as I got into the professional field, I was able to pay for grad school out of pocket. And now I still have debt, but it's a mortgage on a house. So still not debt free, but definitely, there's different strategies to pay that off. And I believe that there's good and bad debt, and a mortgage is, in my opinion, is not a bad one, but is a debt nonetheless. So anyways, fast forward. So today, like I mentioned, after a few years of putting, certifications and putting the work in, I became a cybersecurity professional. Now I have a six-figure salary. I get to travel. And as you can see, I'm very passionate about personal finance. That's why I started Abundancia Mindset, because there's a lot of people that I believe would benefit from having a personal blog about it where they can go and reference things. And yeah, that's as of this year, I'm close to hitting six-figure investment in my portfolio. And if you follow me in Abundancia Mindset, you can see that I'm always advocate for index funds and ETFs. And I've done a little bit of real estate as well. And we recently moved to London, my wife and I, and we're fairly new here. So we're still trying to figure out how to deal with this, but it's very expensive as well. Quickly, I'll show you my investment journey. As of 2019, as I got more educated about personal finance, I decided to start Abundancia Mindset right before the COVID outbreak. And COVID taught me that there's still a lot of challenges when it comes to people's finances, right? I remember some of my friends were working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. Other friends were unemployed and other family members. And I was working from home, and somehow I felt that in all of that, things weren't really fair. So I decided to promote the Abundancia Mindset blog and spend time to put together content together for everyone. So let's move on. I've sent out some invites, and this is based out of your feedback. And I think most of you were interested in the credit card debt. We're not going to touch on everything in this presentation, but I think most of the presentation will apply to most of this. So let's continue. The other piece of feedback I got is that many of you want to build generational wealth, which is great. This is what I'm trying to do as well. A lot of you talking about emotions, money, family, emotions and money, and risk management and retiring early. There was one here, hiding money from the government, which this is something that I think I'm trying to figure out as well. So anyways, so you came here to learn how to get out of debt, right? Well, the formula is simple, honestly. So to be debt-free, just spend less than you earn. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you. I'm just joking, but if it was so simple, I think everyone would not be in debt, right? So it's not so simple. It takes a lot. I've learned that when it comes to money issues, right, it's all boils down to psychology, right? So I think our modern society is built so that everyone has debt, right? So honestly, it's very abnormal if people don't have debt, because you require, in order to build credit, you need to get into debt, right? To apply for credit cards and whatnot. And that's how you build debt, because that's how basically merchants and other lenders are going to see if you're trustworthy. So they let you borrow money, right? So regardless, everyone needs to get into debt. And that's just how our modern capitalist society works. All right, so I'd like to get started. Speaking of capitalism, bank fees, right? I think, most of us get paid, whether we get paid via a physical check or we get paid via direct deposit. A lot of times we don't take a look at our bank statements, right, to see how much we're getting charged from our banks. And, there's household names of banks that are pretty easy, right? Like, well, that we're all familiar with, like Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and a few other ones. And most of those, what I consider brick and mortar banking, they have this type of fees, right? So you have monthly maintenance fees. If you need, for most of them, you need to have a minimum deposit, right? Which was what was hurting me when I was younger, because I needed to maintain a certain balance. And since I kept getting, going under negative, I was getting fees on top of fees. Nowadays you can go paperless as well, but they'll charge you just providing you statements, right? It's not cheap to send you mail. And as you can see, even if you're traveling or if you're in a different part of town that you don't have access to your ATM, you'll get charged for that, right? So there's tons of fees that your bank is going to have. And I would encourage you to look into your income statement or your bank statements and see where those fees are where you're incurring those fees. And like I mentioned, two of the most popular banks in the US are Chase. And this is a quick example. I'll go through it fairly quickly for this and Bank of America. But basically, as you can see, a lot of them have fees, right? And it's, you need to have direct deposit or you need to maintain a certain balance. If not, you'll incur a $34 fee. If you withdraw with another ATM, you get, you get more fees in addition to that. So for this particular account, depends on what type of account that you have, right? For some of them, you're required to have higher balances. So make sure that if you are going to open an account with one of those two banks, make sure you take a look at what the fees are. And that way you don't have any surprise since when you're looking at your statements. Same for Bank of America. They'll charge you paper fees. And if you're asking for any kind of checks, right, which not many places ask for it, but if you're purchasing a house, you'll definitely need to have a cashier's check. So let's stop paying for those unnecessary fees. And I'll touch on how we can avoid paying for fees. And that way that doesn't, continue digging us further into debt. So the first thing you could do, which is the easiest option, is just set up a direct deposit, right? And this allows your employer to deposit directly to your bank account. And that way you don't have to get a physical check. Then, at Friday after work, drive through traffic and deposit it at your account, trying to make sure that you beat the 5 p.m. rush, right? Because most banks close at 6. And here's a quick way of how you can go about it, right? So the easiest way is just going directly to HR or human resources and ask them for a direct deposit form. And, once you fill out the form, it'll ask you for this information, return it back to HR. And within 1 or 2 weeks, they'll set that up, right? And they might take up to a month at times, but hopefully, the process is very straightforward. The other things is maintain a minimum balance. Like I showed you earlier, for both Bank of America and Chase, there is a minimum balance required. And that way you won't incur that fee. Open an online account. So I personally have Ally specifically for savings accounts, as it gives you a lot more interest yields. So instead of making 0.01 cents from Chase or Bank of America, you make a lot more each year. And alternatively, you can look into credit unions, as credit unions are not for profit. And when it comes to ATM withdrawals, sometimes they'll refund your money because those basically those are some of the pros of having a credit union. And most of them are local, so you'll probably find one near you. Number 4, don't overdraft, right? So I'm not sure if this option is still there, but you were able to call up your bank and ask them to prevent you from overdrafting. So that way, instead of going negative, your transactions just get declined, right? So that makes it a lot easier for at least to have that peace of mind as far as not being in overdraft. And number 5, try to use your bank's ATMs. One of the pros of having, something like Chase, Wells Fargo, or Bank of America is that they have so many branches available. So it makes it a lot easier. And number 6, just go paperless, right? There's no reason for you to receive, paper statements every 2 weeks, unless you like to do that. But, 21st century, we have the internet, so it makes it a lot easier. So that concludes the first part on bank fees. So like I said, we touched on how setting up direct deposit, and also, how to avoid paying some of those fees. And now we'll move on into actually looking at our expenses, right? The stuff that's going to take some time. So, yeah. All right. So the first steps on actually tackling our debt, in my opinion, should actually just sit down, maybe grab a sheet of paper and look at your statements, right? And just write down all of your expenses, right? Actually, you don't even need to look at your statements right now. Just think of, what do you spend on every, week, what are your monthly bills, right? Here I have electric, water, cell phone, internet, and rent. What subscriptions do you have, right? Do you have all subscriptions, or do you have, just one? And even if you do you actually use it, right? So anyways, take some time and, put those expenses down. Then, kind of break them down, right? Like as you saw into monthly bills, monthly subscriptions, credit cards, and other expenses. What this is going to do is going to allow you to actually list out all of your expenses, right? A lot of times we forget, what we had. I recently realized that I was paying for an Audible account, which I thought I had closed. And apparently I just froze for 3 months because Amazon only allows you to freeze before you can actually cancel. Or if you want to go the modern route, you can sign up for a personal finance website. So what this does is you can set up, there's all these websites that allow you to consolidate all of your, pretty much allows you to connect to your bank accounts or your credit card accounts or your investment accounts. And it allows you to see, all of them in one dashboard, right? So I personally use Mint, but I read, really good things about Personal Capital, which I believe is free. Mint is also free, and you need a budget.com, which I don't think is free, but I think this is one of the best places to plan your budgets and whatnot. Here's a screenshot of my Mint. And as you can see, you could set up a budget. I don't remember the last time I set up this budget, but what I wanted to show you is just how this looks like, because you can be very specific and very intentional about how you can create your budget, right? And also it breaks down this by category. So it makes it super simple to see, how much you're spending in coffee shops or, shopping, or how much you're spending on gas and whatnot. So it is very eye-opening once you look into it, especially if you're going back into a monthly view, 3 months or the whole year, since you don't realize it, but things do add up. So I think it's a very useful way to look at your current expenses and look at a snapshot of how you're doing, right? So like I mentioned, you can consolidate all of those, whether you're using one of those websites I suggested, or whether you're doing it in a spreadsheet or manually. You're going to start seeing, where your spending habits are, right? And like I said, some of them might be, intentional. Maybe you do love coffee, or maybe you don't like coffee that much, and maybe you should making it at home, which is going to make it easier for you to, cut back on that specific expense, right? The other thing you might realize is that you might have other kinds of fees, right? So as much as we already touched on the bank fees, there might be things like minimum payments. Maybe you have a credit card that you have, right? And those minimum payments aren't really doing much because your interest on that credit card is a lot bigger, right? So every month, you're getting hit with those interest fees. And those are the kinds of things that you're going to notice when you look at this, right? Also, if you have a mortgage or, something, let's say you have other kinds of loans, right? You're going to take a hit every time you make a payment late, because a lot of them will charge you extra fees. Or sometimes when you pay with a credit card, they have actual credit card payment processing fees, right? So it might be easier for you to connect directly to a debit card or your a checkings account, and that way it's kind of drafted directly from there, and you won't take any fees. So here's a quick review of what we just covered, right? So you took some time to note all of your expenses and basically broke them down into something that looks like this, hopefully. Maybe you decided to do this as a spreadsheet form, or you went into, you created an account in one of those websites and just connected all of your accounts. One thing I want to make sure here is that you do connect everything, right? So your checkings accounts, your savings account, your investments accounts, your 401ks, Roth IRAs, any credit cards that you might have. Let's say you open a credit card with a shopping, Ross, whatever store you have, make sure you connect all of them here. So that way you can actually, you get an accurate picture of everything, right? Otherwise, your account might look a lot better, right? Or a lot worse, depending on that. But this is a good way to consolidate it, right? And like I said, at this point, you're going to notice what fees you're having or what surprises, that maybe you weren't aware of. So this is where we are. So kind of finalizing that, right? As a review, we listed all your expenses, went through all our transactions, and observed any trends. So now we're going to break those expenses even further. So now, we kind of put things into bills and monthly expenses and whatnot, right? So what I want you to do now is break them down by categories, right? So like you have things like basic necessities, like electric, water, cell phone, rent, medication. I would challenge, or I would say that those are pretty difficult to challenge as far as, not needing them, right? So I think right now things have become like the cell phone and internet have become a basic necessity, right? But other things like entertainment, right? Maybe you realize you have 3 different kinds of subscriptions, and not only for videos, but maybe for music, and maybe you have that gym membership that you might not use, and credit cards and other things. Loans, vehicle loans, and other types of things like charities. The other thing, as you have, kind of listed all of your basic necessities and entertainment and whatnot, right? I would also pay attention to when do you pay for those, right? So a lot of times when we sign up for services, it could be any time of the year, right? Or any day of the month. And those are going to be all over the place, right? I think most people might get paid weekly or biweekly, or at times once a month. I get paid once a month. So I have to be very mindful of when those transactions happen, right? So keep this in mind. We're going to use this later. So like I mentioned, you have things like basic necessities, right? But you also have entertainment things. So once you start listing those out, right, maybe you realize that you don't really watch Netflix, right? And you're getting, you're paying $12.99. I think it's a lot more expensive now. But if you're only watching Netflix, let's say once a week, then it might be easier for you to just purchase episodes or seasons via Amazon or YouTube, right? For like $4.99 per season or per episode, right? So that's going to be actually a lot more cheaper than, having this subscription that you don't watch, right? So I would challenge you to, I do think there's ways to cut down on things specifically for entertainment, because again, we're trying to get out of debt, right? So we're trying to get aggressive and, get as much money as we can to pay it off our debt faster. So definitely there's always rooms to cut back things. And in this case, if Netflix isn't that important to you, then just cut it off, right? So then, at some point you're going to add all those up, right? And you're going to get a good picture of how much your monthly expenses are. Like I mentioned, this is a good opportunity to review your current plans, right? Maybe, let's say hypothetically, Netflix or Spotify or something else, maybe they have cheaper plans available, and I'll touch on discounts much later. But let's say someone in your family has, they never signed up for Netflix, right? Well, maybe you can cancel that one and have someone else sign up for a cheaper introductory price, right? If that's available. The other things too, like I mentioned, I have Audible, but I also use Libby, so for free, which allows me to read or listen to audiobooks. So, first of all, pat yourself in the back, because we went through what I think is one of the most difficult things, is to list out all of our expenses, right, manually, and just kind of have a really hard thought on, what is it that we're spending our money on, right? So again, also you looked into things like, plans, right? Like what alternatives do we have? Maybe we can consolidate into bundles. And again, I'll touch into bundles later. But, when it comes to cutting down on expenses, some of you might be students, right? Or you might have a sibling or brother or sister that is a student, and you can take advantage of that, right? If you live in the same household, maybe sign up under their account, right? Their email or something else. Obviously, pay for it, but as you're taking advantage of their student discounts, it is a great way to do it, right? I used to have Spotify for the longest with my university email, and it was a lot more cheaper than what I pay for Spotify now. The other thing too is if you're a teacher, there's plenty of discounts. Maybe yourself, your sister, my two sisters are teachers, so I might ask them to sign up for something and just share the password. The other things, like I mentioned earlier, you can leverage and consolidate a lot of services into one, right? Some service providers or mobile service providers, when you sign up, they might include Netflix for free. Others might include HBO and so forth. And I mean, this is a really good way to get those services for cheaper, right? Even if they just give you like 1 year for free, that's better than nothing, right? And the other alternative you can do is split the cost family style, right? So Spotify Premium or Family allows up to 6 people. And I think most streaming services now do this as well, right? So again, the only thing you have to do is enter the same address, right? Even if you live in separate places, when you're signing up, put the same address, and that's how they're going to tie your accounts together. If you work in corporate, there's a lot of corporate discounts. So look into your intranet or your corporate portal and just search for, discounts, right? A lot of them, even, for health related purposes, like let's say if you're buying some gym equipment, or maybe even if you're going to the theater, you can, take advantage of that. There's other discounts, right? Even if you don't make a lot of money, you may qualify with EBT or Medicaid cards, and you get a lot of discounts there. And if you serve in the military, there's discounts for everything. So my advice is just go to Google, look for deals in this or there, and I mean, take advantage of them, right? That's going to save you quite a bit of money. So just to review, we broke down your essentials and non-essentials, and you saw maybe you're not using your gym membership, or you're not watching as many shows as you thought you were watching, and it might make it easier to disconnect those services, right? You've also noted the due dates for all your fixed expenses. So, every second of the month or every 17th of the month, you get charged for internet, right? And then, like I said, you ask yourself if you really need certain services or not. So now we'll look into credit cards and see which ones have a higher interest rate. So again, going back to that piece of paper that you wrote all your expenses on, right? Let's focus and let's zero into the credit cards, right? To touch a little bit on credit card lingo, your APR is your annual percentage rate. So it's basically the interest on your current balance. And in my example, right, I have a Home Depot credit card and a Capital One credit card. This is how much I pay minimum payment, right? And these are the due dates. So looking down here, it looks like my Capital One Venture card has the highest APR and also has the highest balance, right? So in the next slides, we'll touch on what's the best ways to pay for a credit card, which is one of the feedback that most of you gave me. So there's 2 approaches when it comes to paying off credit card and also any kinds of loans that may have an interest associated with it. So the first one is called the debt avalanche, right? And this is where you're paying the highest interest rate. So in my case is the Capital One credit card, which had 22% APR. Now, this is one's going to save you more money in the long term because you're not paying for that high interest rate, right? And on the other hand, you have the debt snowball. So this is where you pay off the lowest balance, right? So in my case as well, the Home Depot credit card, I could maybe easily pay that one, right? It might be a motivational boost for me, right, to start off with a debt snowball, because if I pay this one, then I might be a lot more encouraged to, pay off the other one. But, again, if you manage to pay for everything, you'll have that sense of accomplishment, right? So this is more of a personal preference, whether you want to go for paying the highest interest rate, debt avalanche, or if you want to pay off the lowest balance, which is a debt snowball, right? Now, when it comes to credit cards specifically, you have further options. And one of them is to use a balance transfer credit card, right? So basically what this is let's say in my example, I had 2 credit cards, right, with different APRs, or even if it's just one, right? I can apply for a balance transfer credit card, and those $2,100 that I owe for Capital One with 20% APR, now that can be transferred to a 0 APR credit card, right, with the same balance. But at least in this case, I'm not paying for that extra interest, right? So if I'm paying those minimum payments that are not doing anything, that might make it easier for me to actually pay off the capital, right? So the only thing about this one is it's a lot more stricter when it comes to the requirements. So for this one, you typically do need to have a good credit score, but again, you should always ask, right? And the fourth option here is a debt management plan. So there's a lot of nonprofits out there, right? And I would encourage you to look into them, right? So for this particular one, you can look for a credit counseling organization. A lot of times, the initial consultations are going to be free, but basically, what this is going to allow you to do is to set up a debt management plan, or DPM. And basically what this is going to do is they're basically going to hold your hand and kind of walk you through the process. And I believe it's a good way to keep you accountable, right? Because now you're giving them the payment and they're going to distribute it how they seem fit, right? And again, this is more of a hand-holding kind of process, but I think a lot of us might need that additional help. So again, those are some options to consider. So kind of wrapping up with this section, we looked at the credit card, and we looked to see when do we pay it and what is our current APR rate. We saw the difference between the debt avalanche and debt snowball, and some options on how we can actually tackle credit card debt. So in the next slide, we'll look at how we're going to automate our payments. So again, let's grab our notebook again. And now we're going to pay attention we're going to come back to our due dates, right? Remember earlier I pointed out to notice when, those expenses are getting withdrawn from your account, whether that's from your checkings account or from your credit card. And what we're going to do is we're going to change those to a date that makes more sense for you, right? So for me, I used to get paid bi-weekly, right? Now I only get paid once a month. So what makes sense for me is to move those due dates to earlier in the month, or I can move them to late in the month, right? Because if I move them to late in the month, then on the first I get paid. And if I'm paying everything from, let's say, the 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, well, by the time I get paid, then I'll be able to pay everything in full, right? But in this case, let's say, I get paid bi-weekly, and I want to call all my lenders or my creditors or, my utility companies, and I'm going to tell them to change my withdrawal times, right? So now I want to pay early in the month, right? So once I called, Netflix, or I emailed them, or once I logged into, my mortgage to change the withdrawal date, right? Now things look like this. As you can see, most of everything is paid on the 2nd, right? And the reason why my credit card is paid in the 6th as compared to all of the other ones is because I actually pay all my bills with my credit card, right? The only thing I cannot pay with my credit card is the mortgage, and I think that's pretty much it. But I use my credit card for everything, and part of it too is because I like to leverage the points and the cashback rewards. But that's a different presentation. In this case, right, there's other charges that I can't pay off with my credit card either. So again, if I was getting paid on the 1st or the 15th, right, get paid on the 1st, pay off all my, those get charged from my credit card. And on the 6th, my credit card gets paid in full, right? So after the 6th, in theory, I shouldn't owe anything for that month, right? So from the 6th to the next month, I might have, some money left, and I can either use that to invest or do something else with it, right? And one thing I wanted to point out is that give yourself some slack, right? Give yourself some time, because let's say, one of the, there might be issues and somebody might withdraw, instead of withdrawing on the 2nd, for some reason they withdraw on the 7th, right? So you're going to miss that particular thing out, right? So just give yourself some slack as far as when you pay, let's say, your credit card in full or something else. So that way, you don't have any surprises. And then, like I said, once you set up those payments, it's going to allow you to start planning better, right? So like I mentioned, for me, if by the 6th of the month, I know I already took care of all my expenses, well, in this case, I have $1,250 left, right? Well, that allows me to plan a lot better with this, right? Maybe I can use this to pay off, my student loans faster, or maybe I can, build a rainy day funds, or maybe increase my savings accounts or add it to my brokerage account. But the whole point of this is just that this is going to allow you to plan better. And now that we know how much money we have at the end of the month after we paid off everything, let's increase our payments. So here's a quick debt scenario, right? Let's say you have a loan, initial loan of $3,000. And for this particular ones, we have the same APR, 80%. And the only difference is that for one of them, you pay $60 as the minimum payment, and the other one you pay $160, right? Well, here's the biggest difference, right? So same loan, theoretically, the same interest rate, but if you pay $60, if you pay just the minimum or the bare minimum here, you'll end up paying $2,587, right? Which is close to what your initial loan was, right? So instead of paying $3,000, you're going to pay, $5,587, right? In comparison to if you paid, $100 extra, then you're only going to pay $549, which is a lot better. But I mean, in reality, we shouldn't be paying interest rate, right? You should strive to pay off your credit card in full. And, the point of going through the other exercise, right, is to allow us to increase that extra $100 a month or more if we can. So that way we can expedite paying off the loan faster, right? So if after everything we went through, you're like, Pablo, we that's great and everything, but I still can't pay off this debt, right? Because it's so much. I hear you, but, just being honest here, regardless of how much you cut back, right? And regardless of how many side hustles you have, the best thing I'm always going to recommend is just to increase your salary, right? So in the next few slides, I'll touch on ways that you can increase your income, right? As much as you see my page promoting side hustles, right? I don't want you to get second jobs. I actually just want you to go to your job and renegotiate and get a better salary or get out of there and apply for a better job that pays you a lot more, right? So again, that's the honest truth, and that's how I was able to pay off my debt a lot faster, right? I jumped a few times. I used to think that that wasn't correct because I was listening to other people's experiences and insecurities. And once I stopped listening to all those voices, I just realized that I just need to look out for myself and make more money, right? At the end of the day, to pay off for my debt. Because loyalty isn't going to pay off your credit card. So, how do we actually increase our salary? Well, what's your market value, right? What is it that you do right now? Whether you're in the corporate world or you're not, right? I always think it's a good idea to talk to different individuals, right? Maybe at your workplace, right? There was one time I realized that a colleague of mine was making $20,000 more than I was, even though we had the same job. But for whatever reason, he was getting paid a lot more, right? So that made me very unhappy. But that also, kind of lit a fire, and that kind of, made me want to get out of there, right? Or negotiate, which I negotiated, but I had a different job offer, and I kind of used that as leverage, right? And even though they were willing to pay me a lot more than that, at that point it was more out of principle, so I didn't feel right, so I left, right? But just realizing that a lot of jobs and a lot of people are becoming more comfortable and being more transparent with salaries, which I think is amazing. I think that's going to make you realize how much underpaid you are. And if you have the skill set, especially if you have a skill set in high demand, then the expectation should be that you're going to get compensated a lot more, right? So again, use this as a way to renegotiate with your current employer, right? So, but it might be easy for me to say it, right? But how do you actually do it? Well, the thing is that you can't just show up to your boss or anyone and say, hey, I want a raise, right? Most likely you have to justify it, right? So sometimes you might have to step back and talk about how you're bringing value, what changes you made throughout the year, right? Maybe you work in sales, give specific examples with numbers, right? Or let's say, for the next review, or, just, I guess one thing you should always do is communicate with your boss, right? Always tell them what you're doing, even if they don't show any interest in, but this is going to remind them that, you're working towards something, right? So if at the beginning of the year you said, hey, here's my plan for this year, right? I want to increase sales in the next quarter or the last quarter by 15% or automate something, right? Then later on, you could have this conversation and use this as a reminder, right? To say, hey, remember we planned this out, and I said I was going to do this, and I did it. And it provided a lot of value for my company. So I believe now I should get a raise, right? And again, having that ongoing communication with your manager, I think is going to be key here, right? And like I said, extra points if you have it documented, right? So that way it's not only, let's say your manager is not the best at keeping notes, right? Or he or she is forgetful, then you have all this proof of things that you've done, right? Especially if you do things like cross collaboration with other teams, that's going to make it a lot easier. So again, based on talking to other people, other professionals, or other, places, right? And again, I don't want to just focus on like the corporate world, because I'll give you an example of something I did similarly many moons ago, right? I used to work at a Sacker at Kroger's, but I used to have friends that work at other places like HEB or Randall's, right? At that point, I was making $5.25 an hour. Other Sackers at HEB and similar kind of markets, right? Retail markets, they're making 25 cents a lot more than me. So that was an incentive for me to try to move to HEB to make 25 cents more, right? So again, doesn't have to be in the corporate world, right? But there's other ways that you can leverage this kind of information just by talking to other peers. Take a screenshot of this if you like, but basically what it boils down to is that depending on the kind of jobs, right? Let's say you're an electrician or someone else that has an actual skill set, right? For a lot of companies, it's actually a lot easier to just give you a salary bump instead of actually rehiring someone new, right? Because it takes time to onboard someone, right? And that's not only a loss of time, but it's also a loss of time of people that are actually training them, right? So if you could put a package together and use this as a way to renegotiate, I think it's a good idea, because a lot of times, it's going to take them a lot more money to try to hire someone new rather than just give you a pay increase, right? So make sure you use this as a way to negotiate as well. So I know a lot of you might feel like this isn't the best time to negotiate, right? But again, like I mentioned, always keep your boss up to date on what you're doing, right? Even if you move this piece of paper from one side of the desk to the other one, let them know that you did that. And that way you have all this list of accomplishments, or at least you're on top of their other head, right? Whenever you bring up the conversation about promotion, right? The other thing you should ask them is, what exactly should I be doing in order to achieve that promotion or that salary increase, right? So make sure you ask them about that, or opportunities to go into training or certifications that you can get. And by the time you have your end of year review, it's going to make it easier for them to remember all the things that you agreed to do, and also makes it easier to ask for that salary, right? And have that renegotiation. So again, always promote yourself, or no one else is going to do it. And yeah, just don't be afraid of being your own to promote yourself, right? Because no one else out there is going to do it for you. And that's just another hard truth. So number 3, if for some reason renegotiating didn't work, then get the hell out of there, right? I would say, from my experience, now I've had specialized in cybersecurity, and it makes it a lot easier for me to market myself, right? It makes it easier for me to jump from one organization to the other one, because they're looking for those specialized roles, right? And again, taking off my corporate hat, here's an example of things that you could go after, right? Doesn't have to be in the corporate world. You can become a professional welder, and here's some list of certifications that you can go after, right? And some of the requirements. And even if you didn't go to college, maybe you just have a GED or equivalent, this is still pretty good money for someone who doesn't have a degree. And just because you don't have a degree, it doesn't mean that you can make money, right? I know some people making a lot more money, even running their own businesses, right? So this is just a suggested route as far as how you can become specialized. And again, I would do a bit of research when it comes to an interest, something that you're interested in, right? If you live in the Houston area, well, there's the medical center, but you also have the shipping channel, and there's a lot of, oil and gas opportunities, or trucking. So again, know your area and do a little bit of research of things that you want to specialize in, right? The other thing I would suggest is that you pick something that you actually have an interest in and that pays money, just because sometimes you might feel like money isn't everything. And if you don't enjoy, or if you're not willing to have that trade-off, you're not going to last a long time, right? So again, invest in yourself. And, investing in yourself doesn't mean that, you're buying books to get certified. It could also be attending conferences, right? Or just having some sort of network groups where you're getting more knowledge, or at least you're expanding your network, right? So I'll give you a line that I like, or a saying, which is your network is your net worth, and which I personally like and use. And once you become specialized, or if you're just not happy where you're at because you're not getting paid and you already tried negotiating, well, just find a new job, right? There's always going to be opportunities, right? Don't let anyone scare you, and never be afraid to jump ship, right? So what you can do is just, grab your resume, get the dust off, right? And just pick it up, right? I'll give you one quick advice if you want to be not necessarily lazy, but if you want to get creative, you can look up something called ChatGPT, sign up for it, look for a job posting, let's say LinkedIn, right? Grab that list, whatever the requirements are, and then go back to ChatGPT and say, hey, ChatGPT, create a resume tailored for this job requirements, and then just paste the job requirements there. And ChatGPT is going to give you a pretty good resume that you can follow, right? And just all you have to do is enter your full name and that information there, right? And just modify it the way you are. But I would always just customize it towards for you, right? But anyways, that's a quick hack of what you can do if you don't feel very comfortable building your own resumes. And otherwise, look up for resume building on YouTube, or you can reach out to me and I can help you. Or, look for nonprofits near your city, because there's plenty of places. I know in Houston, there's organizations like Dress for Success. There's organizations like where I joined in high school, Genesis Works. There's plenty of places that are going to help you with resume building, right? And again, if you come across jobs, if you don't feel qualified for them, then just go for them. Because a lot of times it's just showing up to that interview, right? And making that right impression. A lot of times me personally, when I'm interviewing someone, I'm looking more for how they're going to fit, right? From the personality, the culture, right? More so than the actual skill set, because a lot of times you can teach those skills, or they already have skills that can transfer well into the new role. So it's not very important if they don't match all the criteria that we're looking for, because a lot of times you just have to sell yourself in that interview. So again, the takeaway here is that you need to learn how to create value for yourself and to promote yourself, because no one else is going to do it. And that way is going to make it easier for you to renegotiate and have a lot more room for negotiation options, right? So now you can ask for that 6-figure salary or those benefits that you want, right? And yep, so now we've got into the finale, or close to it. And I wanted to share how I automate my finances, right? Again, I went on for almost 10 years of being in debt. And a lot of that was because I'm terrible at remembering dates, right? I'm terrible at realizing that I have to pay for something, or even the Audible one recently, not knowing that you have certain subscriptions, right? So what I mean by automation here is that when I get paid, the concept of paying yourself first, right? Which I've touched many times, which, just as a refresher, paying yourself first means that anytime you get paid, right, whether that's direct deposit or something else, the first thing you're going to do is invest, right? So whether that's investing in the stock market, or invest, adding to your 401k or your Roth IRA or your high yield savings account, that's what I mean by paying yourself first. Then after that, you pay for your bills and whatever else. But again, for me, I get paid, and my contributions go to 401k, Roth IRA, health savings account. The rest of it goes to my checkings account. My checkings account is used to pay for my credit card payment in full every 6th of the month. Some of it goes to my brokerage account, right, where I invest in those individual stocks and whatnot. And like I mentioned, my high yield savings account and direct payment to the house mortgage. And then number 3, I use all my credit cards for all day-to-day expenses and bills. And my savings accounts are mainly for emergency funds. And like I mentioned, I use Ally, but you can look into other ones like American Express or Capital One. There's a lot of really good companies, or SoFi, that are going to have high yield savings. So beat inflation by getting into a high yield savings account. So we finally concluded our presentation. And just to recap, you've decided to take a step into tackling debt. So I applaud you. Tap yourself in the back and pat yourself in the back, I should say, and just congratulate yourself, because seriously, it's a big step that you're taking in actually taking the time and sitting down and looking at this, right? And what we've done is that, took time to write down your expenses, and now you're aware of where your money is going, right? All those lattes or Starbucks, they add up over time, right? And if you're okay with that, then great. But if you're not okay with having other subscriptions that you don't care about, then get rid of them, right? This is part of the cost-cutting opportunities. Maybe you decided to use Livy. Maybe you decided to sign up for a library card and check out books instead of buying them and keeping them in the shelf, right? You've identified a method of paying off your debt, whether it was the avalanche or snowball method, and you identified income increasing opportunities by renegotiating your salary or by getting out of your current job and finding another job. And like I said, now it's only a matter of time till you're debt free, right? It took me 9, close to 10 years to get out of debt. Hopefully, I can help you to bring down that to a lot less. And hopefully we're talking about months and not years. But again, I hope you got something useful out of this presentation. And lastly, what I wanted to share with you, actually, before I jump ahead, there's some resources to help you in your debt-free journey. So there's the online budgeting worksheet. So this allows you to enter your current expenses, and basically it'll calculate everything and you can export it as a spreadsheet, right? And now you can have that in your Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets. Like I mentioned earlier, you can sign up for Mint or any of those services to help you consolidate everything. And you also have, online credit card payoff calculator. So again, this is going to allow you to calculate how much, time is going to take you to pay off based on the APR percentage. And, lastly, I'll leave you with this reminder. Being debt-free is not a race. It's going to take some time, but it's going to take you some consistency and discipline, right? So consistency and discipline are probably the 2 key takeaways, and that applies for anything in life, right? Again, take a screenshot of this, DM me, email me, and I'll send you all these resources. Or again, here's my blueprint on how you can actually, do this and try to accomplish this yourself. So thanks for watching and best of luck.